Mafia. What's up, guys?
What's up, brother? Thanks for having us.
What is good, brother?
Thanks for being here. This is a real honor.
We're here. You made it to Austin, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, about 3 weeks.
His second stint in Austin.
Yeah.
He's the best Austinite salesman I ever met.
He is the best.
Literally met you for coffee and I was like, yeah, I'm doing it.
He did your move and sent like a video.
It's the best move
like,
of all time.
He was like, yeah, I think you just met with Griggs or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, yeah, Griggs told me to hit you up. I was like, yeah, sure.
He said y'all were like pretty good guys. So I was like, I've been seeing their stuff around. But I actually this is funny. So I downloaded Twitter like a year ago.
Yeah.
Kind of just discreetly, just
Really?
seeing what's going on. And I can't remember. It was either Salazzo or Clemenza. One of them I was following because it was like under the suggested for probably like Solbra or something. And when I heard that was y'all, I was like, that makes so much sense. Because I remember like reading those tweets and be like, pretty solid info.
Yeah. And back then we would put our location as Venice, Italy. And people literally thought we lived in Italy and had no idea who we were. They thought we were like, people would meet us and be like, we thought you were like 6-year-old Italian men. We had no idea. Which was classic.
Some people thought that was our actual pictures. I'm like,
what was it like being anonymous? Actually, because that's an interesting question. Was it any different than not being anonymous?
I think go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say I would like to think that we try to tweet the same way, but being anonymous is awesome.
It is cool.
Sling shit.
You can say the craziest stuff ever and no one knows that it's you. And I don't know if that's actually a good thing or a bad thing. It's something we've been thinking about more, which is why we ended up doxing, because we were like, if we're going to say what we really believe, we should have the courage to actually put our faces and names behind what we're saying. But it's also cool in the sense that platforms like Instagram, et cetera, TikTok, et cetera, you can get popular just for being like aesthetic or being super jacked or whatever, where Twitter, if you're going viral, it's for the validity of your ideas too. So that's one of the cool things about being anonymous is you're like, all right, people really resonate with the message that I'm talking about and the thoughts that we have.
I've never thought about it that way. That makes a lot of sense.
And yeah, you can't really be disqualified by, our images were like pretty, like the name was funny, images were pretty funny, but like you can't be disqualified for reasons that people would normally disqualify people, whether it's like, oh, this person doesn't have any credibility. It's like, oh, well, this is an anonymous guy, but he could be.
This is a 6-year-old from Twitter.
Yeah.
Or from Italy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So,
that's interesting. I've thought about the Twitter thing before, as it relates to blowing up. Like you said, you could be jacked and post like some dumb video and go mega viral on Instagram. But Twitter, over a long enough time horizon, it's actually just you articulating your thoughts. So if somebody's going to follow you and or interact with your posts, for the vast majority of cases, it's intellectually, it's for the ideas that you're sharing. So that's a interesting part about Twitter. I'm curious, did you guys start at the same time?
Harry got in the game a little bit before I did, and he'll tell you his story, but he would quit your job. We had done the Waco Ironman together. We played college baseball together initially, reconnected through wanting to do like a really challenging race. It was supposed to be up in Canada. Race got canceled, and we took that race credit and rolled it into Ironman Waco because Harry was interested in being in Austin for a number of reasons, which we'll get into. I wanted to get out of New York City. And then I actually don't know. Why did you start writing on Twitter? You were first Cannoli Clemenza.
Cannoli Clemenza.
I was like, this guy's nuts.
Yeah. I started writing because, I was working on this idea with a guy down here, and long story short, it was in like farming, agritourism, and I basically had no credibility, but I was trying to build a marketplace. And so my idea was just start writing and seeing if I can build some level of credibility and also just like learn stuff and then teach to other people. So I really just wanted to start putting stuff out there and didn't have any expectations on what I was going to do with it. I saw a guy who I had followed, Texas Slim, and he's like a guy who's just all about like shaking your rancher's hand, like getting in touch with your local farmer. Big food system is making us sick. And he was looking for someone to write blogs for him. So I just reached out to him and was like, look, I'm down to write for you. I'm trying to figure out like my angle into this whole new ecosystem, this whole new industry. And so I was just like, shit, if he's willing to like just let me write for him, and he already had a platform. So like if I could write and do it well and it could get some attention and then get a little bit of traction, then I would just, start that way. So it all came from like trying to figure out the marketplace problem, because when you're trying to create a marketplace, it's like chicken and the egg, right? Like you have to create demand by having people interested in actually doing whatever you're going to sell, but you also have to have people on there who are like putting stuff, like contributing. So the idea was like farm stays, and so like you need to have people who are going to want to be on your platform for some reason, and then you have to have people who want to go stay.
Yeah.
And so I was like, this is just going to be an impossible problem to solve if I don't have a platform of my own. So I started writing.
Was Twitter like the only thing you tried, or did you try to do Instagram or anything like that, or was it Twitter right away?
For this case, it was just Twitter. Yeah, it was just writing on Twitter. I was doing blog posts for him too, and I think the blog posts were like doing pretty well. But yeah, for that idea, it was just started writing on Twitter. But that was just like a massive gateway for us. Like more so than anything, it just taught us that we had skills that weren't being tapped into. And I think both of us realized that pretty quickly, that what we were doing at the beginning wasn't necessarily what we were going to be doing with this skill set and interest forever, but we just wanted to keep that writing process going, keep sharing some of these insights, because people were, one, interested in what we had to say, and two, like we felt like we were getting this creative itch scratched where we hadn't really gotten that before.
In your prior roles, like your prior jobs? Yeah.
Like, dude, I was working in spreadsheets before and building PowerPoint presentations.
Spreadsheets to Twitter is I feel like that's a common thing.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
I can't see you being a spreadsheet guy at all. You either, honestly.
So Harry had a sick private equity job. He worked in the investments team at CBRE. And I knew that he was interested in doing this like farming technology idea. He was talking to Justin Mares, who founded Perfect Keto and Kettle and Fire. He's like a CPG guru. And Harry had interviewed and like successfully was talking to Justin about partnering together. And then I remember him casually mentioning when we were training for the Ironman and being in Austin, he was like, yeah, there's this guy, Texas Slim. He has this organization called the Beef Initiative. It's trying to decentralize the food system, connect us with our ranchers. I think I'm going to help out writing some blog posts for him for free. And I remember thinking, I'm like, interesting, he's going to write. I didn't know that he was a writer. And then he was like, hey, like a couple days later, he was like, can you read this? And he showed me his laptop. I think, what was it called? Houston, we have a problem.
Houston, we have a problem.
And I was like, dude, this is some of the best shit I've ever read in my entire life. So that for me, like, we were close friends, and I'm like, I didn't even know that he had this gift that the world hadn't even been seeing at that point.
And that's the beauty, like, of the blog. So how long after the blog stuff did you start Twitter, or was that same time?
It was more or less the same time, like maybe a few weeks, because he was doing all of his blog. He was doing Twitter, like Texas Slim was doing Twitter and blog writing. And so I was doing like a weekly blog post for him, but then like I was trying to promote it some way. So Twitter was the perfect place for that, because he was already on there. He already had a following.
And so, you kind of just hit on it. But like, did you write it all like on your own before that, or like in your journal, or did you kind of just cold turkey that?
Nothing like really directed at the stuff that we started writing about, but I was writing a lot, like personally, like letters, mostly like to myself. Honestly, it was just like things that I was learning about life, stuff that I was going through, and yeah, I mean, I think I have a good voice when I write, and try to think about things in like more of an abstract way, or try to like simplify things that are like complex or overlooked. And I mean, that's like a lot of the food stuff. It's like this is a simple problem, but people make it incredibly complicated because there's so much smoke and mirrors. And so I think the beauty of what we tapped into was just this ability to dilute all the complexity out there into some simple, punchy and bold writing style.
Where I think Twitter either found y'all or y'all found Twitter, because think about what Twitter is, or at least what it used to be. Threads are obviously big now and have been for a while, but it's a character limit.
Yeah.
And it's a very short attention span. So it's like kind of like an Instagram reel, like the first couple seconds, you have to be concise with your information. And so I take it, evidenced by y'all's success to this point, like you guys are very good at that, presenting information in like a digestible but appealing and entertaining way. Like even the title Houston, we have a problem. It's like pretty good.
Yeah. I think it forces creativity. Limits force creativity. Like, I think there's
which is counterintuitive.
A saying for that. Yeah. I don't know.
And that's what a thread is too. It's a mini blog, right? Yeah. You're thinking as the author, okay, I have the opportunity to write a hook. I need to get this person's attention. And then how much valuable information can I pack in 8 to 15 tweets maybe, where they can read it in 2 to 5 minutes and walk away being like, all right, I learned something and I'm a better person because of that piece of content.
Yeah, which is another reason, Instagram too, and probably parts of Twitter do not fall into this category, but Twitter, the reason I was struck by it several months ago when I really got back into it is like the amount of information that I was digesting was incredible. Like Ryan Griggs on my podcast said that Twitter saved his life.
Yes.
That's a hefty statement. That's not like something that's lighthearted. Like he literally said verbatim, Twitter saved my life. And I think people like yourselves, he mentioned y'all, are part of that because it's a place where you can give people that information in a digestible way. And it's also like mixed in with all this other nonsense. So it's kind of nice to be able to take away positive things that are actionable, informative things to your life, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
Yeah. We talk a lot about how, right, if you want to be in finance, you need to be in New York. If you want to be in the health and wellness space, you need to be in here in Austin, which is why it's such a hub. But if you're in some obscure city where you don't have a like-minded community, we totally get why Twitter is so attractive, because it's like, dude, we're connecting. You know, you're from Virginia, you play baseball in Virginia. I'm from New Jersey, we're across the country from each other, but I can still interact with you instantaneously and understand your thoughts and ideas. Like, it's this amazing community where you're not geographically close, but we also can become friends. But the goal is to connect with great people on Twitter and then take those friendships to actually be real life connections too, and turn them into real friends.
Absolutely. It's 100% a means to an end, not the end. I think that's another thing, not to dog on the other social medias, but like you're not seeing a lot of discourse happening on Instagram comments.
No.
Right? Like
it's all like bullshit stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's happening. But like people will have dozens of long tweet interactions about ideas and things that actually matter. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting, Twitter specifically, because especially for like the older people, people that are more stuck in their ways, even some of my buddies, they use Twitter completely different than we do.
Yeah.
Which is totally cool. But I really do think like the esoteric health Twitter space is just it's like the most unique and valuable part of any social media I've ever seen, been a part of, or heard of, frankly.
Yeah,
Totally.
we Harry and I had similar parallels. So with Texas Slim, the beef initiative, they're very tightly wound in the Bitcoin community because they're incentivizing ranchers with Bitcoin. Harry's a big Bitcoiner, so I'd imagine, was it Bitcoin Twitter that kind of got you to connect with Slim?
Well, Bitcoin Twitter, that was why I was on Twitter to begin with.
Interesting.
I was like in my finance role, just like going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. My mind was being blown, and I was just like lurking on Twitter, but consuming so much amazing content. I was like, this is the most powerful platform out there. And then I got tapped into like Carnivore Aurelius and Solbra and some of these other guys who were putting stuff out there in the esoteric health world. I'm like, man, Twitter is unbelievable. Like, I need to get in here. And so
were you using Twitter before? Like, were you using it as like kind of like a casual? You weren't like tweeting anything.
I wouldn't tweet anything. I had a curated feed, and I was just using it to consume because I thought it was the best source of actual information.
Well, I think that's like an extremely important point, and that has 100% been instrumental in my life, especially after the last few years. The paradigm from creation or consumption to creation, said another way, using social media, specifically Twitter in this context, as opposed to being used by it. And I'm curious, I want to get into your story as well, but like, I'm curious if y'all had that moment where you started using it as opposed to just digesting the content, consuming the content. Was there like a moment where you're like, okay, this is a tool that I need to be using instead of being used by?
I would say, so when I got down to Austin was when I started using Twitter. It wasn't apparent to me that I needed to like continue to be using Twitter until we started writing threads.
Yeah.
And that was Brett's like he wrote the first thread that we put out there, and it crushed. And
He's got like the most viral thread I've ever seen.
Okay, wow, we need to do more of this. And I think doing it too in this way where we're starting to develop a brand and we started to see this vision come together. I can't really think of like one moment in particular other than just like remembering the feeling of like the first few threads going off and us being like, it's go time. We need to do like 2 or 3 of these a week and just start putting out really good stuff. Like we were up late into the night, like most nights, writing a crazy amount of threads, just trying to put as much good quality content out there, doing a bunch of research.
Yeah.
That was the
glory days.
The glory days for sure.
You actually made me have a reflection. I never thought about this. So it was like Bitcoin, Twitter got you into the space. And then right around the same time he was doing that, I just had a personal Twitter account where I was just lurking and consuming as well. More on like Prometheus Fawn Balls was my initial Twitter handle. Do I bring it back?
Bro, you got to bring Prometheus Fawn Balls back.
Oh my gosh, dude.
But before
a non-anonymous account, like everybody knows it's you.
Yeah.
It was Prometheus Fawn Balls, and then wasn't it just your face?
It was Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Which leads me to my potential anonymous account, Teddy Roosevelt. So if anybody ever sees that account,
you won't tell
that one out of the bag. You might have to edit that out.
Yeah, but even before, you know, we created the Mafia, I had my own personal account, which was just under Brett Ender. And like Harry got into Bitcoin, which pulled him into Twitter. For me, it was for whatever reason, stumbled across Carnivore Aurelius, Solbra. Deja Vu was huge at the time. He's still big, but he was writing a ton of threads back in the day. Frazzled Dazzled was another guy. And these, do you know Frazzled Dazzled?
No, sorry to interject. I'm just trying to.
Erwick Weiss. He's so autistic.
I'm just trying to imagine like an adult, like a 6-year-old, listening to this conversation, and you talk seriously about Frazzle Dazzle, Deja Vu, Soulbra,
oh my gosh,
Prometheus Fun Balls. It's like, what the hell?
Which is incredible because it sounds so ridiculous, but these guys changed my life just by viewing their content, whether it was around nutrition, food sourcing, creating your own business, starting an agency, sales, persuasion, semen retention, all these other things, like finding your faith. And I just started implementing all these things in my own life, just purely as a consumer. And I thought it was amazing. And that was where, I guess in some ways, the light bulb moment went off, where Twitter is actually a gateway to build a better life. And I think for both of us, we were just, after that Ironman, when we first got on Twitter, we were just looking to do something together because we were such good friends, and realized the one thing we knew and had confidence in is that both of us had this special energy. Like before we started Meat Mafia, we were doing some of these morning run groups and meeting up with people, and they were like, you guys have something special. And like, I don't know what you're going to do, but you need to find a way to work together. And so for us on Twitter, that was our path to build something simultaneously together. And every time that we would write a thread, after we saw that threads worked, we were like, every time we write a thread, it could have the potential to make thousands of people healthier. And that led to us starting the podcast, starting Noble, building out the agency that we have now, doing live events. That all came from just making the conscious decision to write threads. So it's like, you take that first step, and if you grow an audience, your potential is limitless, because if you have eyeballs and people care what you're saying, you can do whatever. Even like Logan Paul is a good example. He started on Vine. Now with Prime, he's the fastest selling beverage company at all times. So you kind of have to figure out what your niche is. And then once you capture attention and have people that really care and fuck with what you say, you can do anything.
100% agree. And there's so much to unpack in that. I have to make note of this. Before I started my podcast, before I started on Twitter, I kind of did all that. I like rebranded my entire like life almost at the same time, to like Tyro and Nolan, pretty much the Tyro experience, all that stuff. I had like no fucking clue what I wanted to do. I had my lawn business. I was living with my parents. I had graduated from college. I had 2 degrees. I'm like, I don't want to use these degrees. Like, what the hell do I do?
Yep.
I don't like mowing lawns.
2 degrees?
Both in real estate.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. But I'm sitting here and like, I had this conversation with my mom. I'm like, I literally have no fucking clue what I want to do. I have so many interests. I like hunting. I like health. I like fitness. I like baseball. I like jujitsu. I like all these things. And she's like, why don't you just start talking to people?
Mm-hmm.
I remember that conversation. I don't think I'll ever forget it.
Wow.
We were on the couch and I was like, I'm going to start doing that. I'm just going to talk to people. I'm conversational. I have many interests. I had like a decent network of people. And the point I'm trying to make, the biggest, what's the word? Reluctancy that I had was the idea that I didn't want to be a part of social media, because I was not aware at the time of what a tool it could be. And the process of thought that I had was, okay, Solbra is the person that I use as an example. Has Solbra posting content on social media impacted my life in a positive way? Unequivocally, yes. Okay, so it's possible to use social media to positively impact people. But I had not been a user of social media. I had been used by it up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
So do y'all see what I'm trying to say? It's
Definitely.
like something clicked in my mind where I was like, holy shit, you actually can impact people 100% through a Twitter thread. Like, so that's where I'm getting at, is like, you actually do have the ability to impact thousands of people from sitting down and writing a thread.
Yeah.
Stimmied out of your mind.
Well, when you make that reframe too, you also become a better consumer of social media too. I feel like I definitely used to like take in a bunch of crappy social media content, like you just didn't want to put anything out there because I'm like, this is like either low value, it's not gonna like, who cares? And then you start to think like, hey, there is actually value in creating something online and putting something out there, but also just like being an informed creator or someone who's just writing and putting high value stuff out there. You're just like, okay, I can curate this entire experience so it actually helps me. Like Instagram feeds is like my favorite thing, where it's like, you don't need it. You don't need your Instagram feed to just be all garbage and shit that's melting your brain. It can be like, there's great pockets of Instagram that's like scripture and monkey memes and all this other shit.
Monkey memes, high value.
You know, high value
Super
stuff.
high value.
You know, so yeah, there's good stuff out there. You just got to look for it and don't let the algorithms. Like the algorithm's the worst.
It is. You touched on a good point though. Once you start to recognize, I think like there's a lot of talk about optimization and how do I write the best possible thread? What are the tactical things that I can do? Or how do I optimize my way into being successful on this platform? And it's almost like you have to have a motivational anchor that's so strong, it just pulls you to get really good at something, right? It's like you have this billionaire that goes on a podcast after he's make all this money and he's telling you about his morning routine, and it's like sauna, cold plunging. He has a chef that prepares him a meal. And then like a 25-year-old asshole is like, that's what I need to do to be successful. And it's like, no, when that guy was 25, he was sleeping 4 hours a night, drinking 17 cups of coffee, sacrificing his body for the mission, because the success, the thought process of achieving that mission was what pulled him. And I feel like even writing threads, you have to have something that's so strong where you're like, look, I know it's going to be cumbersome to sit here. Like sometimes it would take me 2 to 3 hours of research, and then I would separately have to go and write the thread. But I remember thinking, if I want to help Harry and I achieve the life that we want and build a brand, I need to invest this work. And that was really what pushed us and fueled us.
Invest the work. That's an interesting, I've never heard those words in that way. I've heard like invest in the work, but like you're investing your work. And it's another good point about, it's actually kind of, Chris Williamson has touched on this recently, but the idea of taking advice from people who are already where or similar to where you want to be. Oftentimes that advice changes. The examples like Joe Rogan being like pro weed and stuff now, when he used to be like extremely against it.
Really?
What is the other example? Like these people talking about optimizers, where it's like, oh, well, now I get massages 6 times a day, and and it's like, you're exactly right. When you were 24, Tim Ferriss is another example. I'm kind of like moseying through his book, 4 Hour Work Week. He talks about like the 4 hour work week and how it's achievable and you can do these things. But then literally in the beginning of the book, he talks about he built a business, Brain Quicken, sold it for like 100 mil. And then he started exploring that stuff. But he was talking about like literally not wasting, but spending his entire day on that business. Yeah. So you have to put that work in first. And that's really important. That's something that I've, from a baseball perspective, that I like, I don't think I navigated that properly. We can get into that later. I want to get into your story a little bit because my understanding is you had like a health issue that kind of compelled you down the health rabbit hole. So if you want to get into how you got to where you are.
Yeah, I think it's just a classic example of something that you think is a curse ends up being a blessing, because it makes you relatable to so many people. So the commonality that the three of us have is that we were all college baseball players. You were a much better pitcher than we were, 95 miles an hour. Gave up a nice little home run on camera that we watched that your older brother Sean graciously showed us last week.
Need to clip that right now.
You do need to clip that for the podcast.
Click on the top right.
Yeah.
Tyrone Malone. I'll never forget that.
That guy's an absolute
small guy. Pretty small guy.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I hope he listens to this.
Kind of look like Frank Thomas, honestly.
He's
like a club dude.
Dude, that was like Frank Thomas's older brother. It's humongous.
I'll never forget it.
Yeah, but dude, for me, it was just a classic situation of like thinking I was a high level athlete, so I could just get away with like more of a calories in, calories out approach because I look aesthetic and I'm healthy. And what was I doing? I was binge drinking. I was eating like absolute shit. I was chronically stressed out. That was the first college baseball for me was the moment where I went from truly having fun and loving the game and just being super competitive to just having so much fear and stress around like, what if I don't perform and I'm just like the shitty baseball player on the team? So like I would literally get sick before I would pitch. And so I know that played into it. I also have like a genetic history of stomach issues. Like my grandma had some type of colitis. And when I was interning in New York in 2016, I started having the urgency to go to the bathroom, like now, as in like, if I don't have a toilet, I'm literally going to shit my pants. Like
Harry on the raw milk diet.
No, you were phenomenal. Harry was phenomenal.
I was just shitting
diet, which we'll get in ghost poops.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No. But most people that get diagnosed with the autoimmune disease that I had, ulcerative colitis, it's actually most common in men in between ages 18 to 30. And we don't know why that is. My theory is that because we're young men, we're really proud and we don't want to admit vulnerabilities or weaknesses or illnesses. So we just keep it in until it's too late. So I found myself at a point where I was wrapping up my internship at a financial services company in New York, and I was literally shitting blood 20 times a day to that point. So got rushed to the hospital, got the IV hooked up, colonoscopy, and they tell me I get diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is this autoimmune disease where your immune system effectively just attacks itself. Instead of preventing disease, it's actually fighting against itself. So you basically get these bloody ulcers all over your colon and you can't digest anything that you're eating. That's why I was shitting blood 20 times. And I'd lost 30 pounds. I was like a gauntlet. I was like a skeleton compared to what I was. And they put me on these really strong immunosuppressant drugs called Remicade. And they're ridiculously expensive. They cost, the average cost is $400,000 a year. So you imagine people with all these autoimmune diseases that these diseases did not exist 100 years ago. You imagine what that's costing the healthcare system. And so I'm told that I need to be on these drugs forever. And then everything changed for me in 2019 because the carnivore diet really started to, not really, but it started to become a little bit more mainstream. Most people thought it was insane, eating all animal products, red meat, chicken, fish, eggs, tallow, butter, salt, etc., because we've conventionally been taught that those are all the products that are killing us and causing diabetes, when in fact it's the exact opposite, which we'll get into. And Dr. Baker went on Rogan's podcast in 2017. I don't even know why I stumbled across the show. And he was actually saying that people with autoimmune conditions, Crohn's, colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, eczema, psoriasis, etc., were doing this diet and they were actually getting off their drugs and curing themselves. When this thing is incurable, they're curing themselves. So for me, I'm thinking, well, I don't want to be on meds the rest of my life. I don't want to get an infusion every 8 weeks and be dependent on these drugs. Why would I not try it for myself and see what happens? And that's a really important point, is that you have to have a spark of belief if you want to heal too. If you're just doing things, but you don't actually believe that the body can heal, you're never going to heal. You almost have to flip that switch of like, okay, this is actually possible. God gave me this body. I can get myself out of the mess that I caused it into. So for me, it was like, I basically did thousands and thousands of shitty reps and iterations of wrong food, alcohol, stress, not enough sleep, etc. So it's probably going to take me some time to dig myself out of the metabolic rut that I got myself into. And so I, went to Whole Foods. I was living in Manhattan at the time, loaded up on steak, eggs, chicken, all the products that I just mentioned. And dude, I was like, I'm gonna do this for a week to 2 weeks and just see how I feel. And if it doesn't work, I'll get off of it. And dude, literally within the first week, man, my stomach calmed down more than it ever had in the entirety of me getting sick. I went down and going to the bathroom probably like 5 to 6 times a day at that point, to 1 to 2, which was life-changing for me. My skin got clearer, put on more muscle at the gym. I was popping out of bed at like 4:30 a.m. to work out with like this sense of urgency. I've never really suffered from anxiety or depression, but my mindset felt so fucking clear. And that's what so many people notice when they do this diet, is there's like this vigor, this vitality that comes from doing this. And so I started to see my body heal. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to do this for a week. I ended up doing it strict for an entire year and essentially just transformed who I was as a person. And, marathons, triathlons, Ironmans, ultra marathons, just kept stacking the deck, kept getting more intentional about the food I was putting into my body, started getting into regenerative farming, sourcing my meals. And then, a couple years later, I ended up getting off all the drugs and medication that I'm on. And my GI told me that out of all the patients that he's had, which is probably thousands of patients, I'm the only person that he's ever successfully gotten off of drugs before. So for me, that was my moment of like, I don't care what a peer-reviewed study says. I know this diet works. I know how sick I was. I know how good I feel now. And that was partially what, fueled Harry and I, of just how do we teach more people about this to show them that they can get off this medical merry-go-round that so many people are unfortunately attached to right now. There's
so much to unpack in that. That's, first off, like, respect.
Thank you.
That's really, really cool. And it's so interesting too. I was speaking with somebody about Twitter. So many people on health Twitter are on health Twitter and have a following because of exactly what you just said. They were told something's incurable. They were told they have to live with X, Y, or Z for this long, and they have to do this. And then they figured out that they actually could do other stuff, and they just teach people about it.
Yes.
And the same can be said with money Twitter. A lot of people like figure out how to make businesses and things like that. But the pharma medical or merry-go-round, that's something that you guys are obviously passionate about getting people out of. And it's almost synonymous with health. One thing, let me step back. People that are not in the esoteric or like health space, like on our side, they're just like, I want to live healthy, kind of like you and probably you and myself included before, like where you're like, oh, I just need to be like eating decent foods, can't be like eating junk food every day. As long as I like am lean or like in shape, then I'm probably healthy. As you found out, not the case. That sounds insane to people. Like there's still people out there that think that you are insane for trying.
Oh, dude,
an all meat diet.
Harry's heard this story thousands of times, so I feel bad every time I tell it. But like, I was working at a very liberal tech company in the city, so there's all the engineers that are in there. These guys had degrees from MIT, Harvard, some of the most cerebral dudes you'll ever meet. They're 40 pounds overweight. They're going for lunch. They're getting a slice of pizza. Then when they're coding, they have a Mountain Dew and then an insomnia cookie. And so for me, I'm bringing a pound of
good.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. It sounds like if you want to shit yourself, it sounds amazing. And they're looking at me because I'm bringing in a glass Tupperware container of a pound of chopped ribeye, ground beef, bison. And I was just salting it and just crushing it in the office because I didn't care. And they're like, dude, you're literally going to kill yourself. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm in the best shape and best health that I've ever been in. And you're eating a cookie, a pizza, and a Mountain Dew. And you're going to tell me that I'm killing myself. That's how backwards we've gotten as a society.
This is why Twitter's the best, because Twitter owns the post-physique mantra.
Yeah.
Which it's like health is very it's objective in a lot of ways. Like happy people are generally healthy people. People who look healthy and fit are generally healthy and fit. I mean, there's obviously plenty of cases where that's potentially not true, but like for the most part, like you can see someone who's sick and you're like, that person is sick. Like they're overweight or they have some sort of like issue with autoimmunity or whatever it is. And I just think that like with Twitter being what it is, it's great for this fact alone, which is like, you know, the MIT nerds can say all they want. They can read any study they want. Let's see how healthy you are. Like, you know,
100%. I think you're right. And I know what you're saying. Like health is your aesthetic, your physique is a relative proxy for your health.
Yes.
Relative. Obviously there's nuance as with everything, but I mean, I think that there's actually like a really strong neurological foundation for that. And like just the tells that it tells us, like in terms of reproducing with a healthy partner, like why do we find certain things in women attractive? Because it's usually a proxy for a certain type of health. And that means that my offspring will be healthy and et cetera, et cetera. My question really to both of y'all is, how do you think we've gotten to, you guys probably wrote threads on this, honestly. How do you think we've gotten to the merry-go-round that we do now, where it's just like pharma drug, other symptom, pharma drug for that symptom, pharma drug for that symptom, et cetera? How do you think we've gotten there?
Mm-hmm. So we kind of divide and conquer this. There's like there's probably like the farming and actual food production piece of it. And then also like the nutritional frameworks that we now practice and implement. So do you want to take the farming piece and then I'll take the food piece? I
mean, like first off, like food and healthcare and like medicine, they're all related. Like it's only until recently where we've broken these two things apart and been like, here's food, or not until recently, but at this scale where it's like pharmaceutical companies now have a pill for every single problem. Like it used to just be like things that were passed down generationally that like were herbs, teas, just home remedies for certain ailments and things like that. And those were all just created through different like natural remedies. Now we have this massive system that is meant to keep people, healthy for their like issues. But I think since we've divided these two things, we've started to view food less as medicine, is the point of what I'm trying to say. It's like now we're viewing food as just this thing that we put in our mouth. And we don't even think about the fact that there's so much nutritional density in what food should actually be. And we've lost that. And I think us losing that nutrient quality in food has led us to need to have all these different medicines for all these different issues. So the history of the food stuff is crazy. I mean, it really coincides with, like, you could take it back so far, man. Like, you could go back to the agricultural revolution. There are people who think that the agricultural revolution is like the worst thing that's happened in society.
I'm not one of those people, but I might be like close.
Hey, dude, I'm there with you, man. Potentially. It's like, because everything is circular, right? It's like, where do you want to like the problems that are downstream of us starting this agrarian society is that now we're like in this model where we have people who are just like NPCs who are sick. They don't even realize that, like, they're just like trapped in this vortex of constantly needing to pay for expensive medical care costs. They have to like work this job so they can get healthcare coverage, like all these things that basically make it so they don't have any freedom. And it's like, okay, so like, what's the point of having that job? So anyways, I regress.
Well,
so
just
the food
to
stuff.
Interject real quick. Hippocrates has a quote, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food."
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of like exactly what you're saying we got away from. But
Yeah, we've gotten totally away from it. And yeah, it all really started when we started the agricultural revolution, but also just urbanization. When we started moving people off farms into cities for more high production jobs in these factories, it forced an extreme stress on the food system. So we started to have to think about food in a completely different way. You weren't just going to the farmer up the road, or you weren't creating your own food yourself. You now were working a job and had to be dependent on somebody else for your food production. That was generally someone, like, maybe you knew him, maybe not, but these cities were growing during like the 1800s, like crazy. You saw a population in New York, Boston, Philadelphia, double, triple relatively quickly. And so the idea was that a lot of food production needed to get closer to the city. We started cutting corners around things like raw milk is a relatively new concept. Like, pasteurization is this concept of taking milk in its original form and taking a lot of the positive benefits out of it through heating it. And, that was all from urbanization.
I was going to say, but why did we need to pasteurize the milk?
Yeah. So during the 1800s, we moved a lot of the milk production, which is a massive source of calories for most people. Milk is just incredibly nutrient dense, relatively easy to get.
replenishable too. It's like cow literally just produces more.
Dude, it's like there were milkmen for a reason. It was a great way to feed your family.
We need to bring that back, dude.
Dude, I'm so down.
We're going to.
Amazing way to feed your family. And so they were like, we were running into problems in terms of like not enough food for these cities. Ended up bringing dairy cows to breweries and distilleries during the 1800s. And the reason that was happening is these distilleries were basically all going bankrupt. They were going through this massive regulation period, and a lot of them were just struggling to make ends meet. So they were figured, hey, maybe we can bring these cows into the distillery, start selling milk on the side, because milk is such a massive commodity product for most people. And, most everyone at that time was drinking milk. And so they were just basically cooping these cows up in stalls, not letting them move at all.
Shitting everywhere.
In a distillery.
On top of each other.
Like right out back of the distillery. And there's there's drawings of what it looked like. It was just cow after cow after cow. And there's written accounts of this. Like, they were basically head to head along like these stalls, like butt to butt. You would fit as many as you could in a small space, and they wouldn't leave. They wouldn't move outside. You would just feed them brewer's waste, and then you would milk them. And a lot of times you would be milking these cows. They had ulcers all over their udders. They were sick cows. And the milk that would come out was usually purple, and they would dye it with plaster of Paris, chalk, all these other things to make it seem like it was actually milk. And then they would distribute it to cities across the eastern seaboard. And what happened was people started getting sick because these cows were sick.
It's like they're drinking purple milk.
Yeah. Dude, the infant mortality rate was like 50%. That's how contaminated this milk was.
That's insane.
50% of babies were dying from drinking this. They call it swill milk.
That's insane.
Yeah. So
This is nothing. No, unless I'm assuming y'all have like told some people about this, but like I've never heard this before, and I'm like relatively tapped into.
I got a few threads for you, bro.
Well, just think about that though. Like that means there's literally billions of people that don't even know why this is the case, which is crazy. But continue.
Well, in pasteurized milk, people like look at it pretty innocently. Yeah, it has calories in it. The difference between pasteurized milk and raw milk in terms of the actual nutrient quality, in my eyes, is massive. Like, there's a big trade-off there, and people just blanket assume that, you'll get sick if you drink raw milk. If we had standardized processes for handling and taking care of the cows, that it could be there is a massive market there for raw milk and the enzymes. Like, I just think about all the people who are eating garbage at gas stations and how cheap we could probably make milk if we had more people who were invested in just dairy cows. Like, it could solve so many problems with these food deserts and everything else.
I have an interesting point. Actually, I tweeted this yesterday because I had this thought. I'm like, well, so why is milk pasteurized? Because of that. But then now that's a couple hundred years later because people think raw milk is dangerous. So I looked this up on the CDC's website.
Oh, it's terrible. 11
hospitalizations per year between 1998 and 2018 from raw milk consumption. 11. Or it might have been 18. It was extremely low number per year between that 20-year period. There's to the tune of several hundred deaths per day from alcohol consumption. Yet alcohol is widely available, actually encouraged in many, many ways, but you can't buy raw milk at all if you're in the state of New Jersey and you can't sell it across state lines. It's just, to me, that statistic, think about that, over I think it was 220 something hospitalizations from raw milk in a 20-year period.
Yeah.
There's literally hundreds of deaths per day from alcohol, but alcohol is legal. It's regulated, but it's legal and you can sell it wherever. But raw milk is still demonized.
Think about the number of deaths of people that are type 2 diabetic from sugars, refined grains, seed oils, etc. And we don't even think about it. The point of what you're saying is like we've normalized things that should never be normalized. And a lot of these food laws, like what Harry is talking about, are 50 to 100 plus years out of date. Dude, you were talking about raw milk being illegal in states, in most states. Dude, it's illegal in every public school in the US to sell whole fat pasteurized milk. You can't sell 5% milk fat, but you can get Pop-Tarts, Cheez-Its, pizza.
Microwave plastic food.
Dude, you can get Fruity Pebbles, maple syrup at your local grocery store, and you can't even get raw milk in the state of Texas. It doesn't make sense. So the thing is like we can sit here, and there's a lot that we can get into about why we're currently in the situation that we're in. It's a very simple solution, which we'll get into, but what we found we kind of view ourselves as like detective journalists in some ways with these threads, just uncovering these laws and events and things that happen over the course of 100 years that are attributing like the metabolic health crisis that we're currently in right now.
Yeah. If I had to sum it up in a few like simple topics and points in times, like the timeline, it's like regulation really started to dig in right around the turn of the century in the 1900s around kind of like milk and food. Like they were really digging into regulation. And then Rockefeller in the early 1900s became highly invested in the pharmaceutical industry and started making us think differently around the difference between naturopathic health and allopathic health, meaning we weren't thinking about using these natural remedies anymore. He started to really like invest in making it seem like this was like kind of like witchcraft, like using different herbs and spices and things like that. Was that like this like wacko thing to do? And allopathic medicine is this highly controlled way of prescribing different things to help you get healthier. And so like he basically ostracized this whole community of people that had built up insane knowledge around holistic health. And that was like kind of the birth of the pharmaceutical industry. On the other side of World War II is when farming and food really started to change for the worse, when it became much more chemically dependent, chemical fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides. Small farmers got washed out. And then quickly we started to see like guidance from the government saying 6 to 11 servings of pasta, grains, and all these things for the first time ever. And lo and behold, they're also incentivizing people or incentivizing farmers to raise corn, soy, and wheat so they can just like mass produce these cheap industrial crops to flow like right into that like lower threshold, lower part of that food pyramid. And that's like kind of the flywheel that got started to feed into this pharmaceutical model of people getting sick, because we're just loading these fields up with all these chemical fertilizers, GMO crops, and creating this cheap industrially processed food. It's like this crazy timeline, but
it seems so, it's kind of daunting to think about, but I mean, you got to hold your head up. I think like the reason I say it's daunting is because hearing you say that the interconnectedness between big food, big pharma, big gov, like all these things, it's like, holy shit, it's kind of like just a massive dark cloud.
Yeah.
Then you get on Twitter and you're like, oh wait, it might be all right. But
what we thought.
Yeah.
You want to touch on the pharmaceutical side of that?
Yeah. Well, really quick too, the thing that you're talking about, the dauntedness, I think people, when they get into this space or they see our content, they assume like, oh, these guys must be doomers. And that's actually the opposite. Like, we're hopeful all day long. But the important thing is the fact that you're daunted by it is actually a good thing, because the light bulb is going on where you're just admitting, okay, the system is broken. We can go all throughout the history, but there's a very simple solution, which is really just like buy locally from your local farmer and eat God foods that are created by God in nature, and stop eating man-made shit that's created in a lab or a factory. So that's as simple as it gets. But to touch on Harry's point earlier, like that, did you ever read our Rockefeller thread?
I did not read the whole thing.
I think it was probably before you were on Twitter.
We just posted it today on Instagram.
Okay. I'll read it.
We came across this video on TikTok where it was depicting Rockefeller actually created the pharmaceutical industry, which Harry touched on before. So his company was Standard Oil. It was so big that Shell, all these conventional gas stations that you see now, that was literally all Standard Oil, dude. It was that big. They had to break it up into these like 10 massive giant oil and gas companies that now exist. His scientists found out that you could create synthetic vitamins through petroleum. So he was like, holy shit, this is an amazing business opportunity. He's a smart guy.
And he controls all the oil.
Exactly. Rich, one of the richest men of all time, extremely business savvy. So what they do is they're like, okay, well, we need to now make this pharmaceutical approach to medicine more mainstream. So him and Andrew Carnegie actually teamed up and they created something called the Flexner Report, which Harry alluded to. So essentially, they created, through the Flexner Report, a code of standards that medical schools and doctors needed to follow. And it was all around the allopathic, reactive approach to medicine. So all these preventative forms of medicine, all these like holistic health practitioners, doctors, et cetera, that were focusing on prevention of disease, they were all deemed as quacks, which is kind of a genius thing that they did.
Yeah.
So they essentially shut down all these preventative medical practitioners, and then enforce this new medical standard that now is fed this whole like pharmaceutical complex of, drugs, pills, synthetic vitamins, etc. Like Harry alluded to earlier as well. I mean, aspirin comes from willow bark, from a tree, right? But when you think about aspirin, you immediately think drug made in a lab. And it's like, no, nature has herbs and different types of things that actually naturally create these things that are so healing to the body. But Rockefeller was really like one of the core originators of this entire model.
The paradigm that I think is, if someone were to want to take more control of their life in general, but specifically their health, which is synonymous in a lot of ways, follow the money.
Yeah.
Because you look at, you said it's genius. Like the marketing of Rockefeller with pharmaceutical and the big food companies with seed oils and all this stuff, absolutely genius from a business perspective, because you essentially ostracize entire, like the majority of the world. And then I'm not sure if this is something but intuitively I'm thinking, okay, they came up with this Flexner Report.
Yep.
That was for medical students and medical schools. I bet you they were like, hey, you're a medical school, we'll give you funding if you decide to adopt this sort of curriculum that we're pushing. And then what does that curriculum teach you? It probably teaches you how to prescribe the drugs that we're selling.
Well, same thing happened in agriculture too. Like all the ag schools are funded by big ag. And it's like, same thing's happening in medicine. So you end up just having a system that's built to fail. Like there's no way that incentive structure will work in the long term, because everyone will either leave and just like try to figure out a way outside of it, or you know, like for the most part, like the mainstream society right now is as sick as we've ever been, and you're just like trapped in this like sick care.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a pretty doom and gloom if you're stuck in that.
Well, you mentioned it's so funny to hear you say that, because it really is that simple.
Yeah.
Just buy local food from a local farmer that takes care of his animals in his land. But that's obviously that's simplistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we dive into that a little bit? Like what are, because there's so many components to that. I mean, that's part of y'all's mission really with Meat Mafia and Regenaissance and all these people, like getting people connected with their food. Why is that not the mainstream now? Like why are people not chomping at the bit to go to White Oak or to Shirt Tail or any of these people?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've just grown incredibly disconnected with our food system and how we provide for ourselves when it comes to nutrition. Most people have the luxury. We've just built in this luxury of being able to go to a grocery store and expect food to show up, and also expect it to be high quality. And it's all kind of like under the guise of like the government knows what's best for you. The government will keep it, all these things safe. Meanwhile, like you kind of look at like all the stuff that's happening in the food system. Like we're talking about certain things are illegal, like highly processed foods, eating like Coke versus raw milk. It's like, why is Coca-Cola legal and raw milk is illegal in some states? Like Coca-Cola, if you could survive your entire life drinking raw milk. There's accounts of this.
The Maasai tribe is, I mean, they don't drink only raw milk, but like they subsist on almost entirely milk and blood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, there's just like poison in all these grocery stores. So the high level thing that I think about is like, we've just grown so disconnected from actually making the food ourselves. Like we don't have an appreciation for actually creating food for ourselves. Like you said, you're a hunter. It's like, that's part of this whole process. And if people tapped into that a little bit more, maybe they would get a little bit more involved with food production. And like people these days don't even like cook nearly as much as we used to. It's like Uber Eats and all this convenience. And at the end of the day, like it's a convenience problem, what we're struggling with the food system. And honestly, like it's tough to pull yourself out of that if you're just, stuck in that.
It's a weird, perhaps it's not weird, but it makes sense if you take a step back, at least to me. We are built for scarcity. Neurologically, like I believe that society has evolved at a much faster clip than like we have adapted neurologically and physiologically. So we are built for scarcity.
Yep.
But we live in a world of abundance. Why do you think we've cultivated a world of abundance? Because we're built for scarcity, and abundance meant survival. So it's this weird feedback loop, but in reality, the answer in many ways is to create things that are more inconvenient and less abundant, because then it just allows us to operate in a more natural way, in my opinion.
I would argue it's a false sense of abundance too. Like what does the existing system look like if we just like let it continue to run its course and like no change is made in the world of just like mainstream? Like I think that
we turn into Wall-E.
Collapses. Yeah, you have no consciousness. I think being connected to your food creates that level of awareness and consciousness around life itself in all aspects.
100%.
I was going to say, I mean, 19% of our current U.S. GDP is allocated towards healthcare costs. 19%, dude. So I think that Harry painted the perfect picture and you painted the perfect picture of what is going to continue to happen. And also to build off what you guys are talking about, the statistic is that 99% of all Americans have never met a farmer or rancher before. So that in itself is just pure disconnection. It's right. We're conditioned to go to the grocery store. The real foods are in the outer aisles. Everyone's pushing your attention to the inner aisle of the grocery store. 47,000 products in that grocery store. They're controlled by 10 companies. They're really just like masterfully combining corn, wheat, soy, some sugar, make it taste really good, throw some artificial seasoning on there, make these things hyper palatable, the perfect sensation of sweet, of crunchy, of savory, of umami. And then it's like, dude, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, 63% of all US calories are in the form of ultra processed foods. So we don't actually even know what real food is. We're eating food-like substances, which is what Michael Pollan famously coined. And I think it's just such a good term, where it's like, it literally is as simple as just eat real single ingredient foods, cook your meals, connect with the people that you care about, get a little bit of exercise, and you're going to be in a really good spot.
Dude, but most people are failing that test. Like 88% of people are metabolically unhealthy. And I think I read something today, by 2030, it's something along the lines of like 60% of people will be overweight or obese, which is insane.
I think it's already
We're 70.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
is
it's
that
I think it's
Or
already
in America.
in America. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I just botched that stat.
No, well, I think 40% of people are obese, or either
Maybe it was
obese or
obese.
overweight, but combined it's 70%.
Okay.
which is
gotcha.
insane. And the thing, like, so I like to create an enemy. Like, so I'm like,
Need it.
big food. Yeah, I'm like, big
Yeah.
food. Like, I'm a fucking kid. Like, big food
Yeah.
sucks. Big pharma sucks. Have you guys ever heard of Hanlon's razor?
No.
Mm-mm.
So you guys know Occam's razor. Like, have you heard of this?
Yeah.
Like, a razor is basically just like a way of like simply looking at something, or like a way to look at a situation. Hanlon's razor is never attribute to malice what can be adequately explained by stupidity. And so the way that relates is I'd be curious to hear y'all's take on this, but I look at like the big food and big pharma as like as legitimate evil entities, and the people that work for them in many ways, in my mind, I'm like, evil.
Yeah.
That being said, I think back in the day, John Rockefeller, I don't think that he was trying to make the Western population miserable. I don't think so. I think he's like, wait, we can maybe make some people feel better, but I'll make like a couple $100 billion. Like, okay, cool. Like, that sounds fine. And there's no like long-term effects. Here we are 100 and whatever years later, there are massive long-term effects. And so my point in that is I don't think it's like this massive group of people saying like trying to make people miserable. I think the machine has gotten so big that it's almost at this point impossible to entirely undermine. And extrapolated one level deeper, people, you said, there are people in the United States, I would be willing to bet this. There are, I don't know how many, that have never eaten like an organic single ingredient meal.
Definitely.
Oh, for sure.
Massive amounts of people. My point is, I don't necessarily think it's their fault. I actually don't, like in this instance. I think it's a product of what do they get taught in schools? The food pyramid. Oh, you don't want to eat that. That's harmful, dangerous. You should eat 6 to 7 servings of pasta a day, and this vegetable that's got glyphosate and all these things on it. So it's just an interesting like lens to look at things through when you realize that people literally just don't know. They just don't know.
Yeah.
Which is, it's scary, but it's also like people like yourselves who are taking to Twitter and the movement that's kind of going on. Like you guys are a part of it. Like there's kind of this movement coming on that's a little bit grassroots in a way where people are starting to take that step. So how does that make y'all feel?
I think it's great. I mean, I think COVID unlocked a lot of people from just being a little bit asleep at the wheel in terms of the naive nature in which we view like our lives and our relationship to government and just kind of like day to day. At least I know like that was the case for me. Like I was very much focused on my job and kind of just like things that ultimately, like looking back now, it's like didn't really matter. And now like looking at the system, like this is crazy. Like we just accept so much garbage, so many of these garbage paradigms that are rooted in things that no one has any idea how they came to be. They don't question any of the paradigms. They just kind of take what they have and or what's given to them. And I think like the food system is a perfect example of a paradigm that's completely broken and needs massive amounts of repair, or like shit's gonna just continue to get worse. So it feels good like being on the side of the group that's actually trying to do something about what's happening, and do something in a way that's not like, let's just continue to throw money at shit that's just not going to work. Like I wholeheartedly believe that Frankenfood, like genetically modified foods that haven't been eaten or tested before and that are being invented right now, just shouldn't even be considered food. Like we shouldn't consider lab grown stuff food.
Food like substances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's just more processed food. And I get that we're trying to solve a complicated problem in terms of making sure that everyone has enough food. But I also think like at the end of the day, like feeding yourself and that like there's a certain level of self-ownership that needs to take place. And so it's like kind of like an entitled view on it. But, you know, we shouldn't just expect like the government to take care of food and all these other aspects of life. Like I'm just staunchly against the idea of like communism and socialism taking over.
Retweet.
And I think that this whole like industrialized food model leads us to that super quickly. As soon as you're relying on the government for food, you know, it's game.
Well, there's an interesting paradigm, and I want to get your take on this, but this the idea that like knowledge equals power, right? And ignorance equals bliss. Those are actually polar. So you kind of have to choose. Either you're going to be ignorant and blissful or knowledge and powerful. And for somebody to take responsibility and ownership of their life, that means they have to have power. And to have power, you have to have knowledge. Yeah. So I really do believe that like knowledge is the source of that change. Yes. And that's why I love like y'all's podcast and any number of people on social media and in life just pushing for that. But how does it make you feel to be like on the good guys team in my
I would say to what you said, I would say ignorance is bliss, but ignorance when it comes to your food equals temporary bliss, but a premature death, right? So it's like there's definitely certain people that just don't have access to any of the knowledge or insight that we have. And then there are people like people that I used to work with that have probably access to the same knowledge that are just choosing to keep their head buried in the sand. And it's like, dude, you can bitch about paying a little bit more money up front for regenerative meat, or you can bitch about paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for the drugs that you're going to be put on. I think it's a really simple choice. But like I was saying earlier, I mean, the stuff that we're doing makes us hopeful, constantly hopeful. When you go out, dude, and talk to these ranchers in a way that you're doing or a way that we've been fortunate enough to be able to do, and you meet these people that are fourth gen where they're technically asset rich because if they sold their property, they can make a bunch of money, but they're super cash poor because people just haven't been buying for them for decades, but they feel such a responsibility because they want to provide you with the most nutrient dense food possible. Like it just fires me up to want to get more people to go seek out these ranchers. Like Jersey Barnyard is a great example, dude. They can't even keep their raw milk on the shelves. They're sold out all the time. Dude. And that was not the case 10 years ago. So that's
probably
a good
not even 3 years ago, honestly.
Yeah, they've seen an insane uptick in growth because customers are actively like, not only do I want raw milk and I'm in Austin, I'm going to drive an hour to you because I want them access to the most nutrient dense food possible. I want to be that intentional. And like, there's power in what we have as a voting customer every single time that you make a purchase. That's why General Mills is buying companies like Epic Bar. That's why Kraft Heinz is buying Primal Kitchen, because we're demanding these healthy products so much that they're growing so big that these big food companies are like, oh wow, this is actually a great asset that customers want. So we could probably have a debate or discussion on is that a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it's like, dude, if you listen and you demand these things, these customers will listen to you because they're trying to make as much money as possible. So if they feel like there's more money to be made in regenerative beef and selling these high quality foods, like they will make that switch. I'm
a firm believer, and this might be out there, I believe that your dollar is worth more than your vote in the current circumstance that we live in the United States. The money that you spend does more from an impact perspective than your vote.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a belief that y'all share, but I entirely agree. Like, I can spend more money now, but also this is another thing. Like, so Chase from the Woolshire, who makes wool pillows.
Yep.
They're like $180. I love mine. I'm not sponsored by them, but like it's a phenomenal pillow. I would 10 out of 10 times as a freaking broke 24-year-old that I am, buy that pillow because I know, number one, now I know Chase. And I'm like, okay, when I buy this, I know it's going to you, your family, and your community.
Yep.
As opposed to some Chinese factory that then is actually just funneling money into some CEO's pocket.
Yeah.
That's a very, very small microcosm of what you're saying, though, like going to your rancher and spending more money, but it going directly into American and local families.
Yeah. Your values go where your value goes. It's like that simple. I think the Twitter economy is kind of building this whole like the the mainstream economy where it's like Wilshire is on there. All these alternative brands are on Twitter selling their products, selling their missions, selling the information, not selling, but giving out that information that's like, hey, you can take control of this stuff, but you really just need to be intentional about how you're prioritizing spending your money.
Yeah. We need to bring back the local food maker and the local artisan 100%. Like we went out to our buddy Nate, who's a great regen grass finished rancher in Dripping Springs, and was like, hey dude, how much meat do you have? He's like, well, how much are you willing to spend? I'm like, $300, just whatever, steaks, ground beef, primal blends, just give me whatever you can. He loaded me up, took it out of the chest freezer, packed me a bag, drove back home with it. And I was literally just like staring at it in the fridge for 10 minutes. Like I was literally giddy because in our mind, and hopefully the person that's listening to this, I literally couldn't think of a better way to spend my money than giving it to him, knowing how fucking hard he worked to provide me with this food too. It's like, dude, buying raw milk, meat, eggs, whatever from a local rancher and farmer, it's a sacred transaction that we've lost, right? Like choosing to buy your jeans from Origin, who's growing the cotton in Texas and they're manufacturing it in Maine, buying these old mills from 100 years ago. That's like a sacred transaction. Like the way they view it is every time someone doesn't buy a pair of jeans from us, fuck, they went to Levi's and got their shit from China. Like that's how intentional we have to be with this stuff. And it's like, yeah, dude, you're probably going to pay $15, $20 more for a shirt. You're probably going to pay $3 to $5 more for your ground beef. But like, goddamn, dude, your health is going to benefit in the economy and the system, and it's going to benefit, and we can win.
We can, but that's the point that I think needs to be hammered home is we can win when that happens, because then it all circulates in the same way. And I have to touch on this because this is a pivot, a core memory of mine, a core moment of my life. Do you guys hunt at all?
I haven't. Harry's gone.
Gone once.
So I've been hunting my whole life. Killed my first deer when I was 10, but we'd always go to the butcher. With a rifle. When I was in Richmond, Virginia, and if this was like one of the only reasons that I went my 5th year and decided to play baseball at VCU, which it's not, but if it was the only thing I took away, I think I'd be considered worth it. My buddy John Lucas has property near Richmond. I went hunting, started using my bow, shot my first deer with a bow, killed it. I cleaned it in the field, so I took the guts out, took it home in my downtown Richmond house, literally in the garage. Like people walking past the garage, they see a dead deer carcass hanging. They're like, "What in the fuck is going on?" I killed it, I cleaned it, butchered it, cooked it, and the reason this just reminded me that I looked at it in the freezer. I have this picture on my phone of like my entire section of the freezer just packed with meat. And I'm like, every single step of the process, other than the animal growing up, I was a part of. Nobody else.
Yeah.
And I can confidently say, I don't even remember the taste, but it's my favorite meal I've ever had in my life. The first liver and the first backstrap that I had from that deer. Okay. Because you talk about like local, it doesn't get more local than that. Extrapolated one level deeper, what have we always been doing, or for a long time, we've been getting meat from our tribe.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think that the sacred transaction is so important.
How many bites of meat went to waste with that deer?
Zero.
I
spent, zero.
It's literally disrespectful to the animal in your effort to let a single bite of that go to waste. Just like with Nate, it's like, do you really, like normally back in the day or whatever, if I go out to a restaurant and I want leftovers, I'll just tell them to take it. They'll just throw it right into the garbage. With the meat I bought from him, I'm like, this is disrespectful to the animal's life, to Nate's effort that he put into this, to throw an ounce of that stuff away. And we need to have more of that intentionality, that mindset around food.
Well, I would argue our relationship with food has changed our standards across society altogether. Like this whole idea of waste in food is such an ignorant and ridiculous waste of people's time, energy, and money. And I think the cost is that we dilute ourselves down to like very little appreciation for things that are given to us, God-given to us, very little appreciation for the effort that goes into all of the actual real hard work that, puts food on the table, which is ultimately like really the only thing that matters. So yeah, I just think about like our relationship with food and our appreciation for it alters every layer of society. You can see the ripple effect downstream.
Definitely.
From a survival standpoint, this is probably more so than any lens that I look through anything, it's from like, what would a tribe have done and why would they have done it? What did food mean? Like, say I was a hunter and I went, before we were even farming, say I went and killed an elk or a bison in the plains, and I brought it back to my tribe. I said, hey guys, look, here's food. What does that mean? That means survival for y'all and for me. That means that literally we get to continue living because it wasn't guaranteed back then, right? So we talk about sacred transaction. That is legitimately sacred. So I think there's something hardwired in us that, like, one of the greatest gifts you can give, and I'm getting somewhere with this, that I think is like one of the coolest things ever. One of the greatest gifts that you can give is high quality food. And so this is a movement. This is kind of a little side note. A movement that I'm trying to like bring forth is like, make cakes. Like, don't give me cakes for my birthday. Don't give me fucking junk food for Christmas. Like, give me either nothing or give me like a piece of steak.
Yeah, steaks over cakes.
Yeah, straight
Let's
up.
go.
My buddy Dalton killed an elk. He went hunting for an elk this year. That's an extremely strenuous thing. You train all year for the opportunity to kill an elk, and the success rate is not even close to 100%. He killed an elk, harvested, packed it out himself, and gave the entire thing away to one of his buddies in his family.
Wow.
Is that not one of the...
That's amazing.
I literally can't think of a better gift, like, in all of gifts. I think that's, like, from his perspective and the family's.
The intentionality that went into that is mind-blowing.
Thoughtful, and, like, you've provided for someone at the most basic level of their life, being able to give them something to keep them going for the next days, weeks, months, years.
And in essence, the ranchers that you're talking about, that's what they're doing on a day-to-day.
Yeah.
Is like every day they're investing their time and their work to being able to let you guys and me and whoever else eat it, which is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, there's like a degree of psychological reconditioning we need to do. So similar to what you touch on a much smaller scale, it's like you go to someone's house, right? It's considered polite or thoughtful, or what you should do is like bring them a bottle of wine, for example. Dude, bring them regenerative beef tallow from like a local butcher or a local farm or something like that. Like, don't give your friends poison. Give them something that's actually going to nourish them and something that's really memorable and cherished and sacred, like we were talking about.
Think about Thanksgiving. I don't know the exact origins. I know there's a lot of like psyops around that, but like, just meals in general, like that. Those are like some of the actually the most sacred moments of our entire lives, sharing meals together. That's why y'all bring your own steak thing. That is so cool. And I think Danny actually was telling, this is a little bit about Austin, and it has not to do with steaks, but about wine. Danny used to live in New York, I guess. Yeah. And he was saying that when you'd go to a party, you'd bring like a wine. Here, it's like you bring a book or a steak, which I think is so cool. And it kind of actually brings me to a point I want to cover. Austin, you guys moved here for, why'd you guys move here, actually? I'm not even quite sure.
So just to clarify, Harry's been here for 2 years. I came out more just to like do the race and like get an Airbnb with him and just check out a city. I went to San Diego for a year and then I came back.
Gotcha.
But there, you felt a very particular calling here for sure.
Yeah, I was split between Salt Lake and here, and I was working on just this business idea with Justin Maris, and he was either gonna partner or mentor me as I launched this business that was separate from what Brett and I are doing now, and I felt like I needed to be close to someone like that. I had gotten his attention, and I really just wanted to like, I wanted to have my own business. I wanted to be around people who had had success before building their own businesses, and I got his attention. And he was in Austin. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just like get down there, see how I like it. Hadn't signed a lease. You know, we had an Airbnb. I hadn't signed a lease yet, but I was sold. I had my car packed up and everything. I was fully committed on being down here. Just like, if there was any reason that I like if something fell through with me and him, but I was pretty committed to it because I just saw the health and wellness scene down here, and through the process of interviewing with him, I just did a lot of self work. Like, he was asking me questions about it was just like deep interpersonal stuff, like, what's driving you, what's your dreams, all these things, and I wrote it all out, and it was just like happening in Austin. So I just figured it was just a place to be. Yeah. And then we went down for the race. We came down for the Ironman.
Rest is history.
Yeah.
You were also, we had this in common. Harry was in Boston. I was in New York. We were ready to get the hell out of these cities too, man. Like,
it was post-COVID.
Boston was never you.
No, terrible thing.
Yeah, there are some good parts to it. I was in New York. I love New York. There's some amazing parts to it, but we were both in this just transitional phase where we just wanted this fresh start. And, you know, our favorite author of all time is Stephen Pressfield. And one of the books that he doesn't get as much credit for is the book, Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be. And the point is, like, if you want to be an actor, you need to be in LA. If you want to be in finance, you need to be in New York. Now it's like, if you want to be in health and wellness, you need to be in this city. I remember being in New York thinking to myself, especially when I was really going down the health and nutrition rabbit hole, like, I just feel so abnormal in this city. I feel like I don't really fit in with a lot of people. I was like, I've never been in a city where there's a few million people walking around, but I feel lonely, right? It's like bars are normalized. There's a Chick-fil-A on every corner, but I can't even find like a sauna or a cold plunge. Here, it almost feels like it's the complete opposite in that way, which is
that a sauna over there?
Cool. Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing, that I think Twitter scratches the itch for a lot of people, because it allows you to build this digital community where it makes you realize that you're not on an island, that there are a lot of other like-minded people that think similarly to you that you can learn from. But you need to take that a step further and actually put your ass where your heart wants to be, in that exact city that will foster as much growth as possible. That's why Harry and I, when we met you at the run, we were like, dude, you need to move to Austin. Like, we don't know you super well, know what you're passionate about. If you're telling us that you want to do this, there's no other city for you than to be here. Like, I remember tweeting out last year, I think we'll look back at Austin, Texas, like Renaissance Italy, because there's that much incredible stuff in the health and wellness space happening here.
I think I mentioned this to you maybe recently, but this kind of ties into the meat mafia and y'all's picture. That's from the Renaissance. That's
the
like
red meat Renaissance.
If you look up Renaissance painting, that picture, I think it's Michelangelo. Yeah. There's an interesting correlation there. Like,
definitely,
Florence was to the Italian Renaissance as Austin is for the American, I think, and it's, I got to tell you, I've never been to a place like this in terms of exactly what you're talking about, like Squatch specifically, but just Austin in general. When you talk about, Ryan Ayala always says this, and I think it's so true. Finding uncommon people is uncommon, right? That's why they're uncommon. So finding them is equally as hard, if not harder. To find them, you have to put yourself in the rooms that they're in. Mm-hmm. And Austin, like for what you just said, like health and wellness or podcasting, or really just like esoteric thinking in a lot of ways, is the hub. And like the Squatch is a perfect example. You go in the sauna at Squatch, the likelihood of you having a conversation with an interesting person that's doing something that's like not the run-of-the-mill thing is almost 100%.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Definitely.
Yeah, we just before coming on your show, Harry and I did a live Q&A podcast where we took a bunch of listener questions and answered them. And one of the guys wrote in a question. It was a good question of just recommendations for scaling the show. So there's obviously, cold outreach, video messages like you love to do. There's all these little like tips and tricks and things that you can do. And then the thing that works best is like the old school approach, which is what I think Harry does better than anyone, which is like physically put your ass in the room, in the event or the gym or the space of where you want to meet great people. And you'll build relationships with those great people, and you'll get the best guests on of all time and build the best relationships of your life.
100% agree. And that actually kind of relates to another point, is y'all's ability to build community. I mean, I've only been here for 3 weeks. I was here in the summer, so I knew y'all before that, but y'all's ability to build community is I've never seen anything like it, honestly. Like the bring your own steak event, and then you're doing first appointments, which is like legendary. Then you're doing the thing with Danny, and then you guys are doing the thing last night. It's just this never ending like building of a tribe almost. And I think that's actually one of the cool things about modern day. Back in the day, you didn't get to choose your tribe. That's the reality of it. If done correctly, you can actually choose your tribe now. And that's what you guys are like, building this tribe. It's so cool, man.
Yeah.
What? Go ahead.
That's all Harry, by the way.
Is it?
Seriously. So you wanted that? Yeah.
What is that something that you've always done? Like, have you always been like that sociable, but in like the actual building of a community type way, or is that intentional?
In high school, I was super involved with building community for my class, and was like 3-time captain of the football team. And one of the things my coach always said about me was like, I would treat the kid who was warm on the bench the same way I treated the other captains on the team. I just had that philosophy about life. Like, we're all supposed to just be doing this together. Like, it doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to be as painful or lonely. And like, you can create awesome experiences for people in very simple ways. like bring your own steak, let's grill out. I like a personal thing with me is like, I just feel like people overcomplicate like most aspects of life and try to do things for external appeal, and like all kind of like proactively try to do like the opposite of that. Whereas like most people, when they host a party, they really like are nervous about like every like X and O's. And I'm just like, bring your steak, got the grill, let's go. Like you just being here will make it a great experience. And yeah, I mean, I didn't really, in Boston, I was not a community builder at all. But in high school, it was definitely something where like I went to the same school for a long time. It was a big part of like the DNA of the school. And it was something I just like lost during the early parts of my 20s. So when I got down here, I was just really intentional about like trying to build my own thing. And I knew I wasn't gonna be able to do that alone. So I just tried to tap into like all these different communities in like a very real way. Like I was just like, who do I want to be around? People who are taking their health seriously. So go to all the different gyms and like try to tap into the triathlon community down here and be a part of like what Natasha's doing at MBDM, and just all these places that I legitimately just wanted to be there because I just found these people inspiring and just great people. And that's just brought a whole number of different networks of communities into our realm, which has been amazing.
You tweeted after that bring your own steak something I almost tweeted I should have. That's a common occurrence. I feel like you should just tweet it. But you tweeted, Danny Miranda will show up to a party, eat 2 pounds of steak and 6 sweet potatoes and act like nothing happened. I was going to tweet, Brett Ender and Harry Gray will host a party, cook 50 steaks and not eat a single bite until everybody's done.
Yeah.
And I say that as a sincere compliment to y'all. I noticed that. That was like one of the first things that I noticed when I got there. I was like, okay, they haven't eaten. And I took note of it. And then you guys, we sat around the island and ate. That to me is like that's the epitome of leadership. Like the leader eats last. That's so admirable in my opinion. And I think that's actually in a obviously not intentionally self-serving way, but that's what makes people drawn to y'all is that exact mindset. It's the servant mindset. It's like, okay, well here, we're going to put on this space and we're not even really be a part of it. Like we're going to just facilitate y'all being here. And then for some reason people are like, oh, Harry and Brett, good dudes, even though y'all were like literally just cooking steaks all the time. So I just got to commend y'all for that. It's absolutely inspiring and extremely admirable.
Yeah. I think what Harry is exceptional at is like simplifying things that most people would probably overcomplicate. So I think a good example of that is like when we started the office party where we grilled steaks for a bunch of people, my initial thought process was like, fuck, do we have the resources to be able to do this or whatever? And Harry's like, no, dude, they'll bring their own steaks. We got a grill. I'll buy all the shit. We'll be good. I'm like, all right. He's got it. He's done like enough things successfully where I know if he's super passionate and confident about something, we can probably pull it off. But there's like this blend between you can simplify things to give people a great experience, but then also have that hospitality mindset too. Like it genuinely feels good for both of us when other people are having a great time and you're like accommodating to other people's needs too. Like we were just like hammering, like Harry's on the grill. He's like a freaking maestro. He's got 7 steaks going. I'm seasoning everything up. You're so focused in that experience and trying to provide for other people. It's like, I don't need to fucking eat right now. Yeah. I want to just like, you want other people to have a great time.
Well, we were also just like totally in flow. I mean, that whole, yeah, it's just fun being able to like put something on for other people and have other people just have a good time.
I think that was me, Ryan, and Luke's first, I think it was our second or third day in Austin. And well, I had been here before, but if that was somebody's like first experience as like in a social setting in Austin, I feel like it would be completely apropos. Like that's like a microcosm of what Austin can be. Yeah. Just like, yeah, man, we're going to meet in the backyard, hang out with a lot of cool people, mostly in the health and wellness and like ranching space, bring your own steak. It's going to be real cool. That's literally what happened. And it was phenomenal. It was a great time.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, man. Ryan did bring a Twitter day to that, which was absolutely iconic. So shout out to him for doing that.
He really did.
She's probably listening.
No, definitely not.
She was great.
Dude, that's hilarious.
Didn't you?
Well, they recorded a podcast.
No, they did.
No, but they might as well have.
At the table. He was literally interviewing her at the table. Well He's a smooth criminal, that young man. Yeah, but fuck, I had something good I was going to say, and I totally. You know what I was going to say? In some ways it is Austin, but then also in some ways it's not traditional Austin. And what I mean by that, like what Harry did really well is he started going to a bunch of different events. He started bringing me with him. I started finding some of my own events. And even in like the ranching space or the health and wellness space, there's this weird like new age spirituality around the city too. And I think in some aspects it's good that Austin is a spiritual city, but the new age spirituality stuff, I don't think either of us really agreed with. So we essentially were like, well, why don't we just put on events our way? You know, we love Christ. Let's do a Christian running group with coffee. Let's like blend all of our interests together. Like, no one's saying you can't just like rip up the playbook and do an event or something the exact unique way that you want to do it too.
Build it and they will come. That's exactly true. See, that's the other thing too. I sent you that video on Twitter, which this is such an interesting story. I got to tell it. I might have already told y'all this, but 2 weeks before, I'm sitting there and I remember having this thought because I just had my buddy Dalton on, who's a big hunter. I was like, I would like to interview more hunting people, like more hunters. My buddy James Scherer sends me this guy, Tyler Geiger, hunter, podcaster, has 100+ episodes. Send him a text. Hey man, let's hop on a call with him. He's like, hey dude, you should start sending videos. Who do you think the first video I sent was? Harry. So I sent him a video the next day. He's like, let's get coffee. We get coffee. He's like, dude, come to church tomorrow. Come to church. Dude, you should come to first appointment tomorrow. Come to first appointment. So it's just, it was one of those things where like you have these moments in your life where you're like, okay, I think you can, in the everyday life, I don't think we can actually see God's hand moving. Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of just blended into the life. But there's certain moments where you're like, okay, that was planned. Yeah. Like that literally happened for a reason. Definitely. And here we are, like however many months later.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not a coincidence.
Well, I don't know, if you put yourself out there too, and like I feel like it's a game of like reciprocating yeses. Like you put yourself out there in a way that like most people wouldn't. And I'm like, dude, I've been in your shoes before. I've sent videos and like had them go unresponded, or someone responded and I was like, hell yeah, let's like link up. So I'm like, okay, yes, let's link up, get a coffee. And then you're just like all about just like what we were doing literally 2 years ago, starting the podcast, getting involved online, and like see something in you. It's like, yeah, let's just like keep this game going. Like come to church and you show up. It's like we start just like vibing. And I think that's like a very valuable thing where, you really have to put yourself out there and just not be afraid of that rejection. Like a younger version of myself would have been incredibly afraid and timid to do what you did. But I think the earlier you can start doing that stuff, the better, because you're going to just attract the people that you ultimately want to be like or be around, be with, and they're going to respect you for it. And they're going to want to spend more time with you. And now look, like we've got an amazing relationship. We're boys with your brother. Like yeah. We're quickly developing a great relationship, and it's all from a simple, you just like not letting fear get in the way. Like I'm sure you're like, it's maybe a little bit.
I took like probably 15 takes. Right. I was just walking around the parking lot like, no, that doesn't sound good.
A lot of times the first take is always the best.
I should have said
first take is always right.
There are a lot of times where I'll record something and I'll be like, fuck, should I record another one? And Harry's like, no, dude, you're good. And then he'll just rip it up on Instagram or whatever. One take Jake. But the video message, there's kind of two things. The first part is what Harry touched on, is that there's like a boldness and courageousness of just like gusto of shooting your shot. I don't care what happens. Worst thing he's going to do is say no. Best case scenario is like, yes, I get on his radar, and then maybe we build a relationship, and who knows what that's going to turn into. The second thing is there's a uniqueness to that most people don't understand, is like we are so afraid of not blending in, when the uniqueness, the thing that differentiates you, is really the thing that's going to make you get on someone else's radar as well. Like the little 1% of saying, I could send a written DM. It's probably easier. I don't have to put myself in front of a screen or look stupid talking into a camera. Or you're just like, no, dude, I'm going to do something that's really unique. Like we get hundreds of DMs every single week. I guarantee you, anyone that sends me a video message, I'm going to respond to, because that's the stuff that I used to do when I was your age too.
Yeah. It's, there's a certain level of rejection tolerance. And I did solar sales for a little bit, and I for a very short period of time, it's a interesting business model to say the least. I got out of it, but I think that door-to-door sales, if anybody's ever thinking about doing it, I recommend it, because rejection tolerance is a part of the game. Yes. Like you literally cannot be successful at that unless you just say, oh, he said no, okay, next guy. Yeah. So like what that did to me 100% tangibly before and after doing that, I had a higher rejection tolerance. Same thing goes with podcasts. I actually showed Luke today, or my brother. Like I sent a guy a DM on Twitter, hey man, you want to be on the podcast? And he sent like the most badass response ever, saying no. I was like, I respect him more, number one. Number two, that's what you're looking at is the worst that can happen if you send a video, if you send a text, if you make that effort. It's absolutely phenomenal what can happen. And I'm actually curious, have you guys, when you guys were starting the pod, did y'all shoot some shots that like were kind of in the dark that landed?
Constantly. Yeah, Ken Berry,
for sure.
2 million YouTube subscribers, cold DM, first 2 months of the show, said yes. Robert Breedlove, massive in the Bitcoin space. Dude, Michael Chandler, dude, was a fucking cold Instagram DM.
Doesn't he have like 1 million? No.
Yeah, we found out that Carnivore Snacks was one of his sponsors at the time. He was promoting their stuff. So we said, hey, can you connect us with Michael Chandler? And they were like, we can't connect you with him, but if you send him a DM, he might respond because he's pretty responsive there. Send him a DM. We're like, hey, we're going to be road tripping back home. We're going to stop through Nashville. We'd love to have you on the podcast. Guy literally said yes like an hour later, but then he didn't respond again for like another 2 weeks. So this was like 2 weeks before the road trip. So we're like, yes, we got Michael Chandler. And then we didn't hear anything back from him.
Yeah. And we sent our production crew to Nashville.
We flew him out for this episode. We spent $1,000.
We were just like, should we get a crew out there or not? And we're just like, yeah, we need to make this happen. Like, it's well worth it.
Yeah. And we were like, worst case, we piss away $1,000 for the opportunity to get Michael Chandler. Best case, he can do it. And then we have the best production quality we possibly can. Mm-hmm. And then finally, dude, I sent him one more message. And then the night before at 9:00, he was like, yes, I can do it 8 a.m. tomorrow. And then he, sure enough, Escalade pulls up. His producer gets out. Chandler pops out of the car. And we're like, all right, I guess we're doing this. And we hung out with him for 3 hours, dude.
And
but
all you had to do was ask. That's so crazy. And one of the other things with the podcast that's so interesting is I built up this idea that I would get rejected a lot more than I have, frankly.
Oh my gosh.
I thought I was getting like maybe 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 5, maybe. It's like the exact opposite. Most people say yes.
Yes.
Which I think speaks to a lot of things. Obviously, y'all, like just your tenacity and your gusto and just the message that y'all are trying to send. People want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people want to say yes to like being on other people's show. Like, I think Michael Chandler looks at it as a way to like be a part of our success story. Like, it's amazing that he said yes to come on, and like we'll be forever grateful for him and like everyone who's come on the show. But it is just a great opportunity to like sharing the abundance of like going after something for yourself. Like, I will always respect the person who's like, I'm starting something, I'm gonna build something. If you this is something I said to Luke, who's doing some work with us now. He reached out early on in my DMs. I'm like, start the podcast, start writing online, like literally just start doing it, and I'll check back in like 2 or 3 months. Check back in 2 or 3 months, or he'd DM me 2 or 3 months later. He'd done 20 episodes of the podcast. I'm like, kid's a doer. Yeah. Like, I'll take, like, that's a win. That's a massive win. I'll like, if he wants me on a show, I'm on a show. If you like, I'm just open to whatever he wants because he's proven to me that he'll just go do the work. And I think it's a huge invitation for people wanting to take a shot on you.
And not only did he do that, he bought a ticket to our Nashville summit right after graduating, and the crazy bastard flew from Arizona to Nashville.
Yep.
And so Harry recognized his talent early on when we were starting to hire for ghostwriters. And I was initially like, I don't know, dude, he's got like a small following. Is he good? Harry's like, no, let me show you some of his threads. And I looked at the threads. I was like, all right, he's definitely got talent. But then the thing that made me pull the trigger was like, anyone that's crazy enough to fly across the country when they're broke to come support us is like someone I would want to hire on the spot immediately. And that just shows like, regardless of the talent that he has at the time, he's going to be super coachable, and he has that like that intrinsic anchor that we were talking about before to succeed. And that's why he's going to be super successful. That's the same reason why we wanted to work with you too. We were like, anyone that's and Ryan Ayala, it's like anyone that's a self-starter at this age to go out, do these podcasts, get these guests, write Twitter threads like that is just someone that we would want to take a bet on because we know they're going to be successful.
You have to be endlessly curious. And like, you can see someone who's evolving and going through creative processes and growing their skill set. It's like everyone who we've ever worked with or hired or like had a part, like a part of what we're doing like you can see the guys who are going to crush and who aren't pretty early just based on their ability to go from the same type of work, the first version to the third version. You'll see a massive improvement just in them tinkering and them going a little bit deeper and finding a new tool to bring into their arsenal. People who aren't interested, they don't do that type of stuff. Like everyone knows people who are just like along for the ride and like uninterested in trying to grow like whatever they're doing. So
it also, the interesting thing about somebody who's further along on a journey investing in somebody who's not as far along, at least for me, and I'm sure of like Luke and Ryan and other folks as well, it's almost sort of like the cow, actually, like from your buddy Nate. When you get that energy from somebody who 100% did not need to give you that energy, it almost, it doesn't indebt you, but it's like, okay, I need to make that energy worth it to some degree, right? Like I need to take advantage of that investment and make it a positive ROI. Because probably one of the worst things that would happen is if like you check back with Luke, for example, in like 2 months and he didn't do either of those things, you're like, well, maybe not, but here you are.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to touch on, just because I think it's so freaking cool, the first appointment. Run me through the story of how that started.
So
did Scott approach us first?
I had talked about doing a men's group that was like so we were doing a book study every Thursday with Scott for the Disciplines of a Godly Man.
Just y'all two?
Us two. It was originally going to be like us two and Scott, and then Scott opened it up. And Scott was like, should we open it up to others? And we're like, absolutely. So open it up to Jack, Matt Ritchie, Joe. So it was like a very small crew, but we would meet on Thursdays. We'd go through this book, and I was getting a ton of value out of it. I know you were getting a ton of value out of it. And we were just taking a bunch of leaps in terms of really wanting to, we had this hunger for learning, discovering more about our faith, what it means to be a godly person, what it means to follow Christ. And Scott had a huge role in that. So he got us really involved with reading this book. And then I had approached him about doing some sort of small group, men's group. It was going to be like a business-focused men's group at our place at night. And then I forget exactly, like there was just, we had kind of established that we would do it. And then there was a lot of back and forth. And then eventually he was just like, I'm not going to be able to make evenings, but can we do something in the mornings? So we just decided to rip the mornings for the first appointment, which is now just like an awesome group of guys who are growing together in multiple ways, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And I don't know, I think we've tapped into something amazing with it.
What's the story behind the name? Like where
that was
who
Scott.
came up? Was it?
Scott.
It's such a good idea.
Yeah, it's such a good idea, right? The name, first appointment, of like that, your first appointment is the men's group, having your encounter with God, your spiritual brothers. Like that is what, like he talks a lot about really making that thought process to the intentionality of reading scripture and praying first thing in the morning. Like don't save your energy for God, give him like your first earnings of the day. And that was the thought process behind the group. And it's like, dude, it's like you go and it feels like jet fuel afterwards. You feel so good afterwards.
I don't know if it's the coffee. No, I don't even drink coffee most of the time. And I'm just like, this is incredible. Like I want to run home.
Yeah. There's the endorphins from the run. There's the coffee. There's the scripture. And then maybe the most important thing too is just the accountability that comes from having actual brothers in arms that you're with too, where it's like, dude, there's 20 plus people there. And there's guys that are opening up around, drug abuse, porn, the shit that they're going through, just like laying it all out on the line and being vulnerable. And it's like, how do you not have respect for that? There are so many guys that have individually messaged Harry and I that are like, dude, I feel like my relationship with Christ has grown so much just from going from individually going to church to actually being part of a men's group. And that's important for anyone that goes to church, is like, whether it's a men's group, whatever, find a small group to go to, because that's really when you're going to get other people that are going to pour into you. And it's going to give you a really close, intimate perspective on your faith and have the accountability of other people around you.
And a lesson in there is, if you can't find one, then
make one.
Yeah, just like y'all did. And I was talking to my buddy Harrison, who I think I'm not sure if you know Harrison.
Gross.
Yep.
Yeah.
I invited him to the one a couple weeks ago, and this last week I didn't even text him afterwards. I honestly, just an asshole move, just being selfish. Like I was just like, he probably won't go, we'll see. It was raining.
Yeah. We're
like already on the walk, and I'm like, oh shit, there's Harrison. Harrison pulls up, and I'm like, this is cool because he did that on his own accord, and he even mentioned the fact that it's not surface level. Like,
Yeah.
you go, even if it's your first time, you're going to talk about things that you probably haven't talked about with anybody to any serious degree in a long time. And it's the first appointment of the week. So you run, you get your workout in, you start sweating. You talk while you're running with your brothers. Then you get into book or scripture, and then you actually talk about things. That is so rare.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are aware of that. Like in Boston
Yeah.
and New York, was there anything you're doing like that?
Dude, 100% no.
Hell no.
Not even close, right? It's so
Yeah.
rare, and it's something that we need. We need that brotherhood, and this actually, anybody who knows you probably knows you, and vice versa. This relates to what we were just talking about. Like, what does y'all's relationship mean to each of y'all? Like, because it just seems like it's one of those special things. Like, if you guys could speak on that, like growing together, building a business together, doing Ironmans together, growing in your faith together, all these things. It's just such a cool, such a unique thing. So what does that mean to each of y'all?
I think I think there's some reason why I'm struggling with what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that I think there's a big reason why the show has grown is partially the uniqueness of what we're doing. Because I don't think there are many other people that are doing what we're doing. It's amazing when you meet someone new and they're like, okay, so you guys are best friends, you are roommates, you're business partners. Like it's like we're stepbrothers in the bunk beds. That's what we always joke about. But it's like, I grew up with one sister. I never had a brother. Like I view Harry like that brother. He has two brothers. I now have a relationship with those guys too. Like I view all of them like my family. And dude, there's moments along the way, like we've overly romanticized this journey of quitting your job and going all in on the entrepreneurial path. Like it's hard, dude. It's really hard. Like selling 401k, selling assets, not knowing how much money you're going to make. But the feeling that we get after a show like this, or like these wins that we both get along the way, and just seeing where we were before we started the podcast, doing that race, not knowing what the future was, to what we've built out now. Like dude, the money, if we made $0, it wouldn't matter. It would still be a worthwhile pursuit because it's changed both of our lives. Like I think we both impact each other in different ways. Like Harry's discipline, he's got this like gravitational orbit where I feel like people are like really drawn to him and want to become friends with him. Like there's so much benefit that I get just being really close friends and business partners with him. And it is that like iron sharpen irons methodology.
Yeah, I would just add to that. Like, I think what we've built in terms of the friendship and business stuff is like the greatest fortune that I could ever have asked for. And I'm like eternally grateful for the opportunity to have a friendship that's built around just leveling up in all aspects of life. And I think that with Brett, there was something early on where we just clicked around this idea that like we felt like we hadn't tapped into everything we wanted to, and both of us really had this fear of dying with meat on the bone, no pun intended. And I think
Intended.
Intended, fully intended.
Intended.
But there was just something about our connection from the get-go where like I knew he knew how to get into a different gear than other people. And we connected over that through the Ironman stuff early on. But like our friendship has gotten way deeper than surface level in a lot of ways. Like real life stuff has happened over the past 2 years that like I just can fully say if I had most anyone else as a business partner, friend, like we just wouldn't be where we're at. Like he stepped up for me when like I had family in the hospital. I saw him step up for his roommate out in San Diego in a way that I hadn't seen a friend step up for anyone in my entire life. Like legitimately quiet, humble support that like you can't even really put into words how amazing of an act it was. Like almost like an angel or like saint-like act. And I'm like, dude, this is the guy that you want to just do life and business with. Like he's going to be there for you. So I mean our friendship is so rare because rarely do you find two guys in their late 20s like single and at this point where you're like, I just want to go all in on something so badly and be able to actually pull it off, like remove the ego from the situation, be like, we'll do whatever, we'll sell cups. Like
yeah,
we were ready to just do something big. And I think, what we've built, the foundation now, like Brett said, if all this crash and burn, I know for a fact we would be pick it right back up and keep going, because there's a lifelong of upside and amazing experiences that we're going to build along the way. But the friendship is the foundation of it all.
Yeah, we'll be at the Austin Homeless Shelter recording podcast before
Literally.
we quit. You know what I mean? Like, we've said that before. How old are you, by the way?
24.
24, yeah. So 29, Harry's 30. It's interesting because there's not really that big of a gap between us. I also feel like you're a lot more mature for your age than most 24-year-olds, but there's something that changes when you hit your late 20s and you start to get into your 30s, where you notice that you're about to transition into the next phase of your life. So what I mean by that is, like, you'll see in the next couple of years, every weekend you're going to start to see people get engaged, get married, start to have babies, start families, enter that next phase of their life. So I think Harry and I are very aware of the fact that, like, we're living an absolute dream and we have a lot of time, but in some sense we have a very short period of time to do exactly what we're doing right now, where it's like we're always going to be business partners, but the skin in the game of, dude, we're living together, we have all this time to invest in this thing, that's not going to be forever, man. And so we have a very short window of time where we're going to make it work.
It's the glory days in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like I very much so feel that y'all will look back when Mafia is freaking a global corp, just changing food and everything for a lot of people. Y'all are gonna look back and be like, dude, you remember when we were sleeping in the same house, literally waking up, running, like doing all this crazy shit together, hosting parties? Man, I think it's so cool. It's admirable. I think a lot of people truly like yearn deep down for what y'all have. I think it's like it's fascinating. It's also a testament to the investment, like a relationship of any sort, like whether it's like romantic or friendship, requires investment, right? Like it requires sacrifice. So it also speaks to the level of depth that y'all's relationship speaks to y'all's servanthood and sacrificial mindsets, which is just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. A slogan that Harry and I were just talking about before we jumped on this podcast is the concept of I just keep saying to myself, like, we will not fail. Not I, but we will not fail. Like, there's so much power in the concept of we. And partnerships are a tricky thing, right? You see partnerships split up all the time. It's really difficult to find those two people that are like really synergistic, really locked in. But there's so much power that comes from finding an amazing partner. There's a ton of beauty of doing something solo. It's really fucking difficult. It's also really difficult to do it with a partner as well. But you get strength from that other person too, where it's like, I know that if I'm off my shit, he's going to pick up the slack. If he's not feeling well, I'm going to step up for him. Hey, guess what, Brett? You're not booking podcasts. You're not finding new clients. You're not doing what you're supposed to do for Noble. That's literally taking food, money out of his pocket to feed his future family. Like, you need to think that dialed in about your other partner. It needs to be that selfless. And there's so much strength that comes from that too, where it's like, normally if it was just me and I'm screwing around watching Netflix, I'm like, I don't really care. It's just me that I'm not harming anyone else besides myself. But if I'm off my game, I'm literally screwing him over too. So like that accountability is so helpful to achieve that higher level than on your own.
Absolutely. It's so interesting how we're more, it's almost like we're more likely to let ourselves down than a brother, which is strange.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think we also have there's a uniqueness to, I think, the way we approach a lot of things with just like reciprocity. Like Brett and I don't have a contract between the two of us for the stuff that we're doing. We hardly ever, outside of like big things, are like, Venmo me for this, Venmo me for that. It's just like, and like we'll get each other's shit all the time. Like, got your coffee, bro, don't worry about it. Like, we just view it kind of as like we're just on the same mission, and we're gonna soar way higher if we just support each other in these ways. And just like don't look at things, don't look at money through that lens of like, oh my gosh, like he didn't pay me back for this and that. It's like, no, we're investing in each other. Like, I brought that coffee because I want you to like kick today's ass and knock shit out of the park today.
Stimmies.
Yeah, like, let's go.
That's a good friend.
Yeah.
It goes elk, steak, stimmies. That's the three best gifts that you can give a friend.
Literally.
Honestly, dude. Yeah, towel.
And towel.
Damn close.
Yeah, we say to ourselves, handshake agreements till death, which our lawyers probably don't want us to say, but it's like, I would literally rather be shot in the head than like nickel and dime him over equity or like be bitching about control or something like that. It's like, if you don't have that ability to just like trust each other on a handshake agreement up until the end, you're never going to make it. Like with Origin, with Pete Roberts and Jocko, they had a handshake agreement until their lawyers were like, bro, you guys are raising millions of dollars. You actually need something on paper. And that's the only reason why they did it.
Which is like, it used to be that way. And I'm not saying like, oh, back to the old days. Like literally that used to be, oh, like, I'm going to give you my word. And you give me your word. Okay, cool. It's settled.
Yeah.
Like that used to be what it was. So it's refreshing to see, because I think a lot of it almost sounds counterintuitive, because the contracts that like partnerships now have, like especially between friends, I think are actually what end up causing like the turmoil.
Absolutely.
Because it gets contractual. Friendships aren't contractual.
Yeah.
Friendships are not transactional. So it, like you said, it kind of plants that seed. We're pushing the 2-hour mark, so I got a couple more questions. One of them, the meat mafia. Like, if you don't know about it, then you need to know about it. First off, second off, what's the mission? Like, what's y'all's vision for meat mafia moving forward?
It started off super simple, and in some ways it is simple. And like when you look at the description of a podcast, if anyone listens to the show after this, like the goal is really just to fix the food system. And it started off through Twitter, through educational threads. The podcast is now like our verbal contribution to that, actually bringing in experts that can speak to certain topics that we can't. And we view ourselves really just as like the guide, the facilitator, the informed consumer off the couch that wants to ask the right questions to help people ultimately get healthier. I think a good way of how we've branched out outside of that is like we also have a marketing agency on the side where we consult with a number of different health and wellness brands to really help them grow on Twitter. And the thought process there is there are so many amazing people that have CPG brands, but they're product people. They don't know how to market themselves. So you might have the best jerky company of all time, but if you don't know how to grow on social media, unfortunately, they're not going to know about it, and they're just going to go buy Jack Links, which is like a massive company, seed oil, sugar, etc. So our agency is our ability to take our skill set on Twitter and then be able to help support our clients and these incredible brands just grow, get the reach, get the eyeballs, get the product orders that they deserve. So that's a branch out. Third branch out is Noble, which is our supplement company that we launched about 6 months ago. So it's an animal-based supplement company. So we're really taking like the most nutrient-dense parts of the cow and turning them into like convenient, delicious powdered form to be able to make this stuff more accessible to a lot of people. So take someone like my mom or my sister, they're never going to eat raw organ meat. I want them slonk. They're not going to slonk. Soft.
Weak.
But if we can make something that's delicious, yeah, she will never slonk liver. We'll get her there though. She swapped out vegetable oils for olive oil and butter and stuff like that. So like even those small wins, dude, if you can get mom to change,
that's big.
Parents are the hardest. If you can start to get mom to change a little bit, you're doing the right 100%. Thing. But it's our ability to give people like that access to the really nutrient dense foods, and that kind of be their gateway into this entire lifestyle where it's like maybe you're starting with Noble Protein and then you're eventually like, oh, I'm going to listen to the Meat Mafia podcast or Tyro. Now I want to learn about a regenerative farm to source my products from. Hey, now I want to go deeper and deeper. And then that really is what starts to spread the movement. And then beyond that, dude, it's like, we're actively starting to plant the seeds of writing a book in 2024, which I think could be really cool. So combining a lot of our passion for the food system, kind of part of it dissect how we got here, but give people really actionable steps to how they can get out of it. Documentaries, it's something Harry's very passionate about.
We're in the best food documentary ever done.
Yeah.
That should actually just be the title.
Yeah.
Dude.
The best food
documentary ever done. And and then hopefully eventually we can have skin in the game where it's like we're able to actually, have ranches, have more brands that are really in line with our ethos and just like kind of have this like full integration, across the space.
100%.
Yeah, I think when we look back in like 10, 15 years, we'll probably have like 20 different businesses that are all tapped into different parts of just like fixing the food system, whether it's the media side, which we think is the most important in terms of getting the message out there, getting information out there that people can trust, but then also products that people can use to actually improve their life, whether it's like, really high quality protein powder from animal sources or skincare or all the different things that can make you a healthier person. Like Brett's saying, like owning an actual property one day and starting to do some like direct to consumer beef stuff.
Meat Mafia Ranch in the future. That would be
100%.
Yeah,
that'd be elite. Are you kidding me?
Meat Mafia hunting trips on the ranch.
Come on, dude.
That'd be
Stop
too-
it. Stop
that'd be too
it.
good.
Any nicotine products in the future? Maybe.
We've gotten approached.
Probably have. My last question for y'all is, you can answer it separately, I guess. But here I am, 24 years old. In pretty much every way, I've like no fucking clue what I'm doing, like in all of life.
Yep.
Like, literally no clue. So my question to you, you don't have to say it to me directly, even though we are talking directly at each other. You can. What do you know now that you wish you knew when you were 24 years old?
I would say it's more so acknowledging certain truths about what it means to get where you want to go. And what I mean is the people you surround yourself with is everything. You need to find the people who are going to be able to move at the same speed as you, that push you, that inspire you. You need to also accept and acknowledge that fear is always going to be in your way if you allow it. So you need to find something that allows you to absolve fear of all other things. And for me, that is a belief in a higher power, Jesus, and a fear of God. And so I think that if I was 24 years old and I had that mindset of surrounding myself with the right people and not fearing anything but the fear of God, you'll go very, very far. Because you'll always have the line that you need to come back to, which is the word of God. And you always have the people around you to keep you moving on that line and keep it fun along the way, which is the most important part. Just have fun and enjoy life.
Yeah, that's super well said. I don't think this is a coincidence, but when I was 24 was 2019, which is when I went carnivore and had my epiphany with food and nutrition, and I started going all in on it. And all I wanted to do was just teach people about this diet. If you asked me about it, I would have like a 5-page write-up for you literally the next day. Like, I don't even know why. I just loved it. I loved like trying to promote this message and teach people. And the reason why I'm saying that is that I felt this voice in the back of my head of like, dude, I think this might actually be it for you. Like, I think there's actually something here. I think this is what you're really passionate about and meant to do. And I remember there were 3 times that year where I sat down at my computer and I said I was going to write a blog and tell my health journey, my transformation story. And I tried it 3 separate times and either overcomplicated it, gave into imposter syndrome, and I scrapped the Microsoft Word documents and never released it. And now I don't regret anything because I do believe that God's timing is perfect and his plans are so much bigger for you than your own plans are, which is something Scott obviously always says at church. But there is a little part of me that was like, dude, what would have happened if you had started putting content out at 24? So I think about you, right? You're 5 years younger than me, 6 years younger than Harry. You're already in the game, dude. You're in Austin. You recorded a bunch of podcast episodes. You know, you're working with us. You're connecting with all these brands. In my mind, I think you already did the hardest part, which is actually like get here and give yourself the skin in the game to be successful. And I think about what we've done in a year and a half, and I think about how mature and polished you are, even just having this conversation at 24. It's like, now you just need to do more and imagine what you can do in 5 to 6 years from now. It would be, I don't even think you can comprehend how much you can do in 5 to 6 years.
Probably be like on the floor somewhere.
So it's like you very humbly are like, I have no fucking idea what I want to, about anything. I think you have a very crystal clear idea of the field that you need to be in. And if you just keep doing what you're doing, these opportunities are going to be immeasurable. When we started the Mafia, it was literally almost like a joke. And now we have 3 separate businesses with like more on the way. So I'm not saying that to be boastful. I'm just saying, if we can do it at this age, imagine what you can do already doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I appreciate both of your responses. The Meat Mafia, it doesn't sound boastful because it's like the mission, right? Like if you were posting, oh, I got 3 businesses, I'm like driving this car, blah, blah, blah. It's like, who cares? But you guys are a mission-driven business, a mission-driven friendship with mission-driven men. And that's immeasurably admirable, in my opinion. So that's a pretty good way to wrap up. I sincerely appreciate y'all's time. I hope this is not the last time.
It won't be.
Yeah, that we get on here. But
when are we going to do a podcast on weaponized autism?
Dude, it's fun. I'll end with this. Obviously, my brother, you guys know my brother now. I asked him before, I was like, should I be like autistic or like, should I like keep it pretty cool? Yeah. And I was like, I don't know. Like, this is actually kind of a tough thing. Like, should I go full autism, or we'll see. This is honestly just to this will be the last point, but the authenticity that, like, here you guys are, like, we're just chopping it up, talking shit. The authenticity that you guys go about, like, your business, your friendship, your life, your podcast, it's just so admirable. I have the utmost respect for you all. So thank you guys very much for coming on.
Dude, we appreciate you, brother. And we're excited to see what you do in the future. Big things ahead for Tyro Experience. So pumped for you, brother.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Right on, fellas. And with that, I hope y'all enjoyed the conversation with Harry and Brett. It really is just an honor to know them and to be in the same corner as them, have them on my team, and to be able to have conversations like that. Such incredible dudes, such incredible insights and knowledge base on the food system and health and just life in general. I really hope that y'all enjoyed this. Follow them on Twitter, Instagram. All those things will be linked on the show notes. Listen to their podcast, the Meat Mafia podcast. Once again, that will be listed in the show notes as well. And until next time, stand firm in the arena.